Okay, I am here with Jessica Morrison, local artist in Boone County. And Jessica, on our art show this week, I reached out to you specifically because you do art, which I'm looking at it now and it's amazing, but you do it for a specific cause. And I would love to hear about your cause and your history and whatever you want to share. So please.
Thank you, Matt, for the invitation. It's certainly exciting to be here, surreal to be talking about my art, and then topical steroid addiction and withdrawal.
Great, great. So, what is topical steroid addiction and withdrawal? Because before I heard about your cause and what you're dealing with, I didn't know such a thing existed. So if you would enlighten us.
Sure. So, where I'm at today, I'm no longer in withdrawal, so I do want to clarify that. But the what topical steroid addiction is your basic hydrocortisone. There's any level of potency with steroids. After 7 to 10 days, some patients get addicted in just 3 days. But you can be prescribed or pick up from your local CVS a steroid cream, apply that to a rash that you may have, and your body becomes reliant on that artificial supply of cortisol, and you can become addicted and not know it. And so I was an eczema patient for more than 20 years, went to my dermatologist to manage my eczema symptoms. In that entire time frame, addiction was not discussed or talked about. And then 2014 to 2016, I had just a lot of life change, stress, environmental triggers, and suddenly my rashes just got worse without any clear explanation. I know now with more certainty what I think facilitated that, but the big catalyst was my dermatologist effectively doubled over the course of that 2-year period the amount of creams that I was receiving, and my rashes just kept getting worse. They kept popping up in new places that they never had before. And when I stopped, I just decided one day in October of 2016, like, I don't think putting on this much cream is healthy. I'm going to stop. Should have talked to my provider, but it honestly wouldn't have mattered because even if you taper rather than cold turkey, according to Dr. Rappaport, it still happens where if you remove the medication, your body can go into withdrawal. And so I can talk about what that looks like, but the important thing is that anybody who is treating chronic skin rashes with a steroid cream is putting themselves in a path of potential addiction. And it's hard to know if you're addicted or not, but I'm part of a local advocacy group in Indiana that's working with itsan.org, the nonprofit, to raise consumer awareness, to propose a bill that would better protect and inform consumers, and then get research into the hands of medical providers so we can prevent this because it is preventable.
So when you talk about withdrawal, what does that look like? If you don't want to get graphic or whatever you want to share, what symptoms were you experiencing?
Uh, it's hell on earth.
Okay.
I'm going to start saying things and it's going to be shocking, but I'm not saying these things to be dramatic. It's just what happens. So when you stop using steroid creams, especially after a long period of time, your adrenal glands freak out because they've been told by the brain, hey, we don't need to produce this cortisol. And so your body has learned to rely on the artificial supply to manage your inflammatory response in your skin. And when you take that away, it kicks the body into overdrive. So I looked like, I'm not kidding, an overbaked lobster. Like, imagine laying out on the beach for 4 hours. That's what my skin looked like. I was super red, leathery, dry, hot, like extreme inflammation. And the skin would become oozing and like, smell like sulfur and iron. It would weep plasma all over my body. This isn't just an isolated area. My eyebrows actually fell out because your body like starts to not spend energy on things that's not worthwhile to heal itself. And so then you have this period of intense inflammation, weeping skin,
And very painful, I can imagine.
Yeah, you have, I'm laughing just because that's just what you have to do after a certain point with how crazy it is. But uh, your skin gets, it's like the steroids thin the skin. And so you get these things called zingers. And it's like all of a sudden you get an itch attack. And normal eczema is just like a light irritation. This is an itch that feels literally like it's right next to the bone, and there's nothing that you can do to satisfy it. I had thousands of cuts all over my body that at 25 years old, I was couch ridden, having to rely on my husband as a caretaker. I couldn't turn my head or lift a coffee pot because of just how broken my skin was. So I found relief by soaking in a bathtub every day for 2 to 3 hours, and my life was like this for years. The circadian rhythm, as you can imagine, was opposite. So when people would be ending their day, mine would kind of be just starting in a way. Grocery shopping at 10 or 11 o'clock at night was kind of a thing for my social activity for a while. There was a cashier who told me once that I should stop using the tanning bed so much. I just let that one go. And then the other crazy part of this is the intense shedding. So your skin goes through this intense inflammatory period and then it just sheds. And we're talking like human snow globe level, like absolutely disgusting. But again, it's just so crazy that this happens, and it's all because of the steroid creams.
So let's relate it back to your art now. How did you get involved, or what made you start painting as a way to, is it a way to express yourself? Talk a little bit about how you got involved with art.
Yeah, because these are two separate ideas very much. So I've always been a creative individual. I got through high school by drawing. That was just good therapy. Uh, and so for a while, as you can imagine, I couldn't paint. I couldn't draw. Doing anything by hand was for a long time impossible. And so now that I am in a much healthier state, I mean, I'm no longer in that withdrawal period, but I am still, like today, figuring out like what was driving the inflammation in the first place prior to steroids, and treating and managing that. But for my art, I really want to make something that matters, that gives hope to people, that gives joy. And I can think of no better cause. Like, as you can imagine, when you're dealing with this condition, you experience situational depression. A lot of people can't work. I have a friend who was planning on going for her master's, and she had this whole career plan, and she lives in Fishers, and that totally got torpedoed. So there's a significant process of grieving that happens, and especially as you heal, it's hard because you feel like what should have been. And so my hope is that as I step back into creating, that I can create pieces that help me process what I've been through with grief and engaging with these really complicated emotions around grief and trauma, and just, instead of avoiding it, having a conversation with it. And so I'm not saying that I have that figured out, but just taking a word or phrase that comes to mind and hopefully creating a piece that gives people hope and feels recognized. And it doesn't have to be specific to TSW. It could be any mental health condition. I hope to create art that inspires people to donate and be part of itsand.org, and then also feel seen in maybe whatever challenge they're facing.
We're going to take a quick break, but we will be back with Jessica in just 30 seconds. You're listening to 91.1 Radio Mom. So, Jessica, I love art, but I am very much not an art connoisseur. So, I'm looking at very abstract, very colorful. But if you had to describe your style as an artist, or what you're trying to convey, how would you describe your art style?
Sure. So this piece series that's dedicated for topical steroid withdrawal awareness is mostly abstract expressionism. And I have a background in doing highly detailed graphite renderings, horses, portraits. So I'm very skilled in a traditional media set, and then I did a lot of landscapes in college in a traditional format with oils. So for me to see a career shift towards abstract expressionism is very new to me. But this series is just taking a word or phrase that comes to mind. So like this is happenstance here, thinking about how a lot of times we can be going through life and it feels mundane, but then we have like a situation that just feels totally coincidental and there's beauty in that. So everybody is going to interpret something differently, and even if I give my feedback on a particular painting and you see something different, that doesn't mean your interpretation's wrong. What's so fun though is to see something like this one with Endurance, where this is a landscape that emerged out of the abstract component, and it's just fun to see how having this conversation with pigments and focusing on a word or phrase and praying as I'm engaging with the thoughts and feelings that are coming back from not being able to create and then persevering, how that came through. So this is Endurance. For those who are listening, it's an abstract dark piece with most of these paintings are with 2 pigments or just one. And then liquid is my medium to spread it around, which is really fun. And the texture that you see in these pieces is actually a nod to the dry skin texture that you see when you have really dry skin.
Because I noticed it's not flat. I see the texture of the paint coming off the canvas here.
Texture, I love detail, and I think all of our lives are more than something that's just a simple stroke. There's a lot of layers to it. There's complexity with what we experience every day. There's complexity in our emotions and how we each respond to trauma or a tough situation. And with Endurance, this was fun to see how it kind of blended the two from my past with landscapes and abstract. And then this purple piece is Insomnia Dreams. And this is actually the only one in the series that uses 3 pigments. And that one for me was just a really fun piece.
So what's your process? Do you sit down in one sitting and complete a piece, or do you come back to it later?
Well, having a 2.5-year-old at home, as you can imagine, I've got to be quick. I actually was kind of forced into painting with a palette knife because as most artists can relate, I hate cleaning my brushes with oils. It's a very intense process if you do that, whereas cleaning a palette knife is very easy. So yes, the process has shifted towards a palette knife, and it's been a fun conversation to try something new. And, another part of this series is trying to make art that I like. That is such a challenge for most artists because you have what will sell and what the consumer's going to buy. Like, I could make local Indiana art that's super, not trendy, but like I can make stuff that I know will sell. And then there's stuff that I feel is what I want to see more of in the world, or maybe something that I have to say. And not that the two can't collude together, but
I'll say audiences are smart, and we also want to see something real as well. Audiences know perhaps when they're being catered to or patronized, and as myself looking at art, I want to feel what the artist was feeling when you created it. And I definitely get that sense here of some sort of lived experience that you're trying to portray here, which I think is really cool.
Thank you. I have a belief, I don't know if other artists share this belief, this is my opinion, but that a good piece of art should be able to stand alone on it, should be able to stand on its own without you knowing the history. And then when you know the history, it becomes more powerful. And the best example I can give to that is I got to visit the Met in August of 2021, and I told my husband when I got back to bury me there. Glorious.
In New York?
Yes.
Yes, I love that museum. Yeah.
How long did you get to be there?
just for a few hours, and you could spend days and days in there. Yeah.
I like, my dream is to rent something on like Fifth Avenue and then just go to the Met for a week, and that's just all I do.
I love that. Yes.
But there was this piece that there was an exhibit dedicated to art from pre-World War I. So imagine we know the history of what happens, and you can see the movement in Austria, Germany, and then the exhibit moved to post-World War II. And there was this painting that couldn't have been more than 6 by 9. And it's muddy, it's dark purple, it's these muted, awful colors, and it's a self-portrait. And it's this little girl, and she's got yellow eyes and like this yellow-green skin, and it just looks awful. And you're like, how was this in the Met? And then you learn her family was taken by the Nazis when she was 4 years old. And this is how she sees herself, as her self-portrait, having grown up in a concentration camp. And if I am butchering any details of that story with that painting, I'm so sorry, and I don't remember the name of the piece or the artist, which is also tragic. But the point was that the testimony is just what gives that the weight. And again, like, is it bad art, or is it art that inspires a call to action? And I think that's always the question with postmodernism and some of these movements in art. Like, is a toilet in a gallery art? Well, we got a conversation going. But so yeah, I just hope that with my pieces that it gives someone hope and joy and feels seen, and maybe something that's hard to articulate.
Personally, I want to feel something when I look at a particular piece, and I get that sense here for sure. Going back to eczema, is there a cure? Is this a lifelong issue that you will face, or what's the future for that?
Well, I'm not a medical professional, so I can give you my opinion.
Yes.
They will tell you that eczema is a chronic, non-curable life condition, and that may be true for some people. I would say in most cases that if you explore immunology, allergies, there's a lot of buckets that contribute to eczema. Like if your gut is imbalanced with an overgrowth of bad bacteria, that can play a role. Liver toxicity, mold exposure. I'm blanking on so many things right now, but like there's multiple reasons why you could have skin rashes. I will say that an eczema patient does not have a protective layer of oil, like genetically speaking, compared to a normal person, whatever that is, where if I, being an eczema patient, come in contact with something environmentally, my immune system and my skin is going to interact with that more and treat that more as a threat. Whereas if you have that protective oil barrier, you know, like wool sweaters, if you can wear a wool sweater, you're special. For me, that feels, no,
Yeah.
It feels like fish hooks on my skin. It's scratchy and it's not comfortable, and it's because I don't have that protective layer there. So there's things that you can do to manage and overcome your eczema symptoms, and I would defer to a medical professional on that. So, and I think that ultimately these conversations are what propel more research, more education, because there's a lot that's changed in the last 20 years.
So in addition to being an artist, a mother, you also are a realtor in this area. Would you like to plug your business for us?
Well, thank you, Matt.
Yeah. She does it all.
Thank you. Yes, I like to joke that I tripped and fell down a flight of stairs metaphorically after college into real estate, because I went to school for illustration, and props to Indiana Wesleyan University. Wonderful time there. But as you can imagine, private school, lots of student loan debt, and I just wanted to get into a career where I could make art when I wanted to, and also have no limit on my income, and that it was what I put into it was what I got out of it. And I also had a suspicion at just turning 22 that real estate would quickly teach me things that art school didn't about business, and that's been so true. I've been in it for 10 years as of this month, which has been really fun. And yeah, I remember when I would show houses and it was 180 days on market and it was nothing. Tides have definitely shifted, but it's been really fun. I work with FC Tucker Company, and it's been a joy. I work primarily through my sphere of influence, referral, and open houses, but I've leaned more into my art in the last year just because I've been healthy and not been able to do that for a long time.
So, if we want to find your art, where can we find it?
Instagram for right now is my favorite place to connect with people. My handle's at Jessica Kasner, C-A-S-N as in Nancy E-R, because Jessica Morrison is a very popular name, believe it or not. So,
real quick before we go, can you highlight the organization one more time for us?
Sure. So if you or someone you know who has chronic skin rashes or uses a topical steroid cream, I would implore you to visit the website itsan as in Nancy.org. That's itsan.org. They're the nonprofit who is working to raise awareness for topical steroid addiction and withdrawal, get research into the hands of medical professionals. You can donate to that organization. You can also check out the Advocate page, and if you're willing, we have a limited time to submit letters. We had a major step where our organization was able to submit to the CDC insurance billing coding that would preface TSW as a medical condition, and that is in process of being reviewed and approved. So we need consumer letters to be submitted that this should be a thing. I've actually been denied disability before because of this.
Wow.
So
okay.
It's a big deal, and it helps propel research efforts for medical professionals. So thank you.
Great to know. Thank you again, Jessica, for being here. Visit her Instagram, visit the website, and we're going to take another break. We'll be right back. All right, so I see we're looking at some of your bigger pieces now. Can you tell us a little bit about these?
Sure. So this one is Give Me Rest, and this has been a crowd favorite lately. It's a continuation from, if you remember the piece from earlier, Endurance.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of had a Bob Ross moment of a happy accident while painting and discovered landscapes could be incorporated in this, and intentionally decided to follow up on this piece with that idea. So what do you see when you look at it?
So I see, I picture this as almost like a wooded forest, and these are sort of like brush or trees hanging down, and then we see sort of a path here. And what's the name of this one?
Give Me Rest.
Give Me Rest. So this just has a very tranquil, sort of peaceful feeling to me, is what I get when I look at this. I don't know if that was your intent, but
yeah.
I like it.
Sure. So yes, the landscape, the trees, the path, certainly the intent there. I would add that, again, just the nod of the dry skin texture in this texture is reminiscent of what we experience with our skin, and how, just when you're striving for rest, you feel this typically. When you want rest, it's because you're stressed.
Right.
And you're usually surrounded with hostility or chaos, and there's just a lot going on. And so that texture is meant to be symbolic in a way of that. I've had people at the gallery tell me that they feel a little sad or depressed looking at it, but it's not like a perpetual thing. But I think the important thing is that the intent came through with the landscape, and whatever somebody takes away from it.
And I actually like the black and white color. I think that shows a really good contrast of maybe almost expressing there's better days ahead, or I'm not sure what I'm trying to say, but I think the black and white colors really help emphasize that for sure.
I love working with a minimal palette because I think that there's a lot to be gained by exploring pigments in their own nature. For the record, I'm terrible about talking about my art. It's a very uncomfortable feeling. I joked, I did some Instagram stories the last time I worked at the gallery, and I joked I would rather walk around in a swimsuit than try to explain my art because it's such a different part of the brain.
Sure.
And I will tell you what I think about something. Like I'm an ENTJ, I'm very high on the T side. So describing what I feel or engaging with a piece is very outside of my element. But I don't know. It's fun to engage with the pigment and see what happens. And
So,
then, yeah.
sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good.
When you're creating this, do you have a picture in your head of what you want it to look like, or do you just kind of start and see where it takes you?
Well, the professional educated response to that is I would do a series of concepts and thumbnails, and then I would do more and you do 5x7s and do color studies, and I don't have the patience for that. So I mean, I might do a couple of thumbnails if I'm not entirely sure about one particular area, but for these it's just been, especially for how limited my time has been, I would rather just start, and instead of striving to make one perfect piece, just make a lot of bad pieces and see how quickly we can get to the good ones.
Yeah.
But a lot of times I'll start with an idea and focus on a word or phrase, and then just kind of let it evolve over the canvas. So I had this thought of a landscape, and sometimes I think it just depends on the piece, Matt. Like sometimes I do have a very clear idea, and other times I don't, but I know the pigments that I want to work with and
Gotcha.
want to see what happens.
So how long did this one take to complete?
30, 40 minutes.
Okay. Okay.
And I have to work fast because the liquid dries fast.
Okay.
So that's part of the medium with oil. And then the texture, it might take longer than I think it does, but for me, I feel like it goes quickly.
Speaking of Bob Ross, you absolutely need to document your painting process and talk along with it. Your voice is very soothing. I think people would get into that.
Thank you. It's a weird thing to invite people into that creative process, and not because I'm like scarcity mindset, oh, I don't want people to see. It's just really weird to think about people watching you work and then not worrying about what they're thinking. And I don't know, just that fear of criticism, fear of rejection or whatever. Like, even if I know somebody loves my work, it's the nature of being an artist is just. And then there's also the reality, and we can hate on Instagram for this because like it's so powerful to be sharing your art on social media, but there's the pressure of looking good while you're doing that. And let's just be real. When you're painting, it's usually like 2 a.m. or late at night. You're in a messy bun, you're in sweats. Like, this is not sexy. This is not like algorithm favored content here. Right. But yes, I do need to do more of that. And then there's the other side of it with my skin of just, it's not how I want to look. Like if I do a close up with the camera and my hand, like maybe I just need to get over it myself. But that's why I don't do more of it. So
well, I think to be an artist in general is to be vulnerable. You have to have a level of vulnerability to put, especially pieces like this that have a deep personal meaning for you, to put it out there and say, this is an expression of what I've been through, how I'm feeling. So I think we can applaud you for that, for sure, of that vulnerability of putting this out there.
Thank you.
In my limited experience of doing some stage acting work, it's I won't say it's the exact same thing, but you have to be vulnerable to get on that stage in any regard and put yourself out there. So I totally understand that piece of it.
Thank you. Well, I didn't know that about you. How long did you do stage acting?
Oh, I still do. So
okay.
There's a community, and I won't take up your show with this,
good.
but yeah, there's a community theater in Lebanon called Center Stage.
Okay.
community theater that I do a lot of work with, and
Aw.
I love it. That's my creative outlet, so I totally get it.
Well, the creative vein, like I think you're correct, Matt. Like if you're getting on a stage, you're being vulnerable, you're exhibiting yourself, and that's a bit more personal because if you get rejected, like that's more on you than it is,
Right.
you know, a painting which you can critique, and you can critique how you talk or articulate yourself. But um, yeah, I mean, same with musicians and all the different buckets that creativity falls under. It's a process, and I'm fortunate that my husband and my family are very supportive, or maybe they're just really good at lying. But um, no, they're wonderful. So
So talk a little bit about your husband. You know, I know he's extremely supportive. You know, what is his role been in helping you with some of your medical issues and supporting this art?
I'm so glad you asked because caretakers, um, like my husband, are the real VIP. I mean, we've got Jesus, and I would not do my testimony credit if I did not give props to that because I have overcome thoughts of suicide by the power of the Holy Spirit, and that's so real. And I could talk for a long time about that, but I'm here today because of God, and that's just been so good. But God gave me a beautiful gift in my husband, and he is the answers I never knew to pray for. Um, I thought I would be lucky to get past a cardboard box after college for a house. Like, never imagined. Like when we got started dating and got married, I kind of had a panic because I didn't visualize my wedding because I never thought that I would be somebody who someone would want to marry, which is really sad. But I was just that insecure. And coming into this medical hardship, I mean, that was like year 2, year 3 into our marriage. So, you know, not at all what we were expecting. And I know we're not the only young couple to go through something tough medically, but he's just, it was hard on him. It's been hard on our faith, certainly. You know, where is God when you're suffering, and how do you praise God when your skin is broken or you're having to watch someone you love go through that? But it's helped us more than anything. Like, it's helped with our communication, and he could have left. He could have belittled me. He could have done a number of things, and instead he leaned in and was supportive. He told me I was beautiful on the days when like he continued to kiss me and love me, and sometimes those hugs aren't always like, they don't always feel good, but you know, he like many caretakers, my mom, like just continued to show up throughout that process and love. And I can't imagine what it's like to watch someone you love go through that, but you know, I'm so thankful for them, and thankful for any caretaker who sticks around through something like what we have to go through, because it's not easy at all. So,
You know, the vows you take in a wedding are easy to say the words, but actually putting them into practice is a whole different story. So I love to hear that you're even stronger now because of this.
it's not easy, certainly, but because of Christ, because of our relationship, like we're both Christians, and I'm not somebody who's like, oh, we're a Christian and life's fluffy and, you know, perfect after that. No. You know, and I sin and I mess up, and if I've wronged anybody, I'm sorry, but you know, we're imperfect people, and at the end of the day, it's just important that we humble ourselves and come back to this together. Like, yes, we have made this commitment. Like, when my daughter was born, I dealt with postpartum depression, and I had thoughts of divorcing my husband, which I'm like, that's not what I want at all. But how do you have those conversations with someone, and you don't want to hurt them, but the important thing is you just keep talking and praying and asking for prayer in your church and support from people around you. And I don't know, I don't have a perfect answer to that.
That's a great answer. We'll take that.
Jesus at the end of the day.
So where do you see this going from here? If you had to estimate, how many pieces have you made so far?
That's a good question. I should know that answer because I have a show right now that's just done. I think there's 14, 15 pieces roughly for this whole series. I do plan to make more. I need to potentially stop doing oils right now and maybe shift to acrylic for health purposes, but which is sad because I love oils. Oils are...
They're beautiful.
They're just so great. And it's hard to not feel like there's kind of this snobbery in art world of like hierarchy of mediums, and like oils being like the cream of the crop, and then you've got acrylic and watercolor, and like which is so sad because there's magnificent artists who do that. Melinda Spearhuff, if you're looking for other local artists, she's fantastic. Felix Melchior, Kristen Whitney, Taylor Walker, they're all CCA gallery artists, by the way.
It's good to know.
But they all do fantastic work in many of those mediums. And all that to say, I do plan to do more. I want to have something to say or particular piece. I've actually got one that I was going to use as my feature piece for the show. It's called Don't Scratch.
Okay.
It's awful. It's just one of those things that you have this idea and then you go to execute, and then it's just like, well, this part looks good, but how do I fix this part? And it's abstract. So you're trying to communicate an idea to someone, and they're like, well, kind of like, and my husband's like, well, so there's this one spot in the painting that's intentionally bare. And he's like, oh, well, you should add texture here because there's texture all throughout. And I'm like, no, that's supposed to represent healing. Like,
that's
heal,
the point, yeah.
heal, but it looks bad. Life of an artist. So we'll see what happens.
So if you would talk a few minutes about maybe the business side of art. You mentioned a gallery. If for up and coming artists, how do you get in with a gallery, or what does that process look like?
Well, I would say do your research, talk to the artists that sell at a gallery, find out what sells, what price range, what percentage that gallery takes. With CCA, it's a cooperative gallery, so I work so many shifts at the gallery per quarter, and then I have a job within the gallery like other artists, and it's all different, but we all work together to make the gallery run. And in exchange for that and paying a small due every month, we get 100% of proceeds, which is super unique.
Great, yeah.
Most galleries take 40%.
Wow.
So, yeah, you got your cost of materials and all of that. And it's risky because you don't know what's going to sell. And then you got to think about seasons. So Easter's right now, so we've got a lot of art about bunnies and stuff like that. And that's what people want. And that's the rock and the hard place is what's going to sell versus what you want to make. And the challenge is finding that audience that will support you in that. So,
gotcha. Is there anything we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
I think just with topical steroid addiction, speaking into just the importance of just the legitimacy of the condition. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a dermatologist appointment or heard stories of other patients where they go to their provider, they try to consult the medical professional, and they're not believed, and they're gaslit as patients. And there's nothing more infuriating than having to pay for an appointment that you felt like you got abused in, or you're not seeing progress in receiving treatment or favorable treatment that you and your provider can agree with, because a lot of times they'll just throw immunosuppressants at you or JAK inhibitors, which essentially inhibits the brain's response to produce an inflammatory signal. And there's pros and cons with that. And I don't know. I just wanted to really highlight that patients, like if you're a medical provider watching this series, that taking the time to listen and believe your patient is so important, because even if that patient is wrong and they don't recognize that they have an infection, like taking the time to educate them on, like I've had someone just say, well, you've got atopic dermatitis. And I'm like, that's not what this is. And then I realized I should have rephrased that because yes, atopic dermatitis is here, but that's not the only thing that's here. Like
Right.
I've had situations where I've had a staph infection that wouldn't go away. And, I think I've got a fungal infection right now. And, I'm going to see my doctor later today, but it's just helping. I hope that my story, like many, will help providers be able to communicate better and more empathically than the cold shoulder that we often get in these appointments.
Are you
So
seeing more providers and dermatologists open to TSW, or is that still an ongoing process?
every TSW patient listening to this just laughed.
Okay.
I would say that's a mixed bag because we have dermatologists like Dr. Peter Leo, who's out of Chicago, who is helping advocate with TSW or with itsan.org. He was part of the CDC conversation, and just there are few who are vocal about it. And I think that's hard for medical professionals because it's a condition that's not yet recognized in the States. So it is in the UK, it is in Australia, but it's not here. And so I don't know what that process looks like for a medical professional to say, hey, you've got a condition, but it's not yet recognized. And I don't know if that puts them in a position of vulnerability with their license or insurance if they say that. So I think more often than not, dermatologists from the patients that I've heard who are going through TSW, when they try to have a conversation or when they present medical journals to their provider, it's shut down. And that's hard because you get put in a really dangerous spot. Like, you are extremely susceptible to infection, and that can get out of control in a hurry. And truthfully, like, and I'm not in this to, I was really praying throughout this past week that I would communicate this correctly, that I don't want to be razzing on providers. Like, there are some, you can talk to your blue in the face and they won't believe you. There's also a lot of people who I think are good and don't quite know how to respond yet. And I think might even be open-minded, but they don't maybe have enough backing yet to be on the wagon. So I'm optimistic. And, if somebody's going to go through medical school or be a nurse and have to change bedpans, like, that's a special breed of human,
Yeah.
So I hope that this is a collaborative conversation and encourages more rather than shutting down and saying, oh, it's all your fault or whatever. Because I also think on the patient end that for what we have to go through, and I'm speaking into this from my own story, like, it took a lot for me to be willing to step back into that field after everything that initially happened with the withdrawal. And so could I have healed faster? Maybe not. But I think there is some onus on the patient to continue to persevere. And that's so hard to say because if I was looking at myself, trying to tell myself like 6-7 years ago what I should do, like, I didn't talk to a therapist until 2 years after it started. And you would think, oh, like, you should do that sooner, but you're just not ready to or don't quite know. So I just want to encourage patients to, as hard as it is, to keep trying to find a right medical provider, because I do think that we see some secondary issues that make the healing take longer, like skin infections or potentially involving elimination diets that can do more harm than good.
I'm so glad you brought up mental health as well, because I think that's something that's becoming more accepted, where it was previously stigmatized and you just didn't do it. So I'm a huge advocate for mental health resources, not just with this, but for just daily life stuff. We all have demons we battle or health issues,
Mm-hmm.
family issues, and getting that out and working through that with a professional is huge. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
It's it's really important. I think, I was listening to the radio the other day. I'm sorry it wasn't 91.1, uh, but the the news report was talking about how young people have, I think the statistic is 40% identify as having some type of mental health issue. And I think we have to be careful about like saying, oh, everybody should go to therapy, because I think whenever we blanket
It's
statement,
not for everyone.
yeah.
You're right.
But at the same time, and I think being a Christian, I do think we need to heavily consider a spiritual aspect of it. Our culture is very atheistic, agnostic, and I've done an internship in Malawi for 2 months and seen witch doctors and seen demon possession firsthand and deliverance from that. And when I came back to the States, it was like, oh my gosh, like it's kind of
culture shock. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of wild how much it blends in. And I don't mean to be like spooky with that, but just I do think that there's more of an undercurrent there than we recognize. And that's just because we're so culturally used to it. And this is America, so everybody can kind of believe what they want in response to that. But I do think that the conversation that we have with engaging with our feelings or how we all respond to a different circumstance is important, because that's how we unify at the end of the day, or love one another, because we can understand better what each of us are going through.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about what got you into a radio show.
I'm sorry, I'm a bad interviewer.
No, it's okay. It was a loose conversation, and we have talked a lot about these other two topics.
No, so I'm very active in Whitestown. I ran for town council last year, which didn't work out unfortunately, but it was a great experience. And I love highlighting the community, highlighting local businesses and people doing awesome things like yourself. And I think that's one thing America is missing, is that sense of community. No one knows their neighbors anymore. I'm speaking generally, but
Yeah.
we're afraid to open the door. We're afraid to talk
Yes.
to people, for good reason a lot of the time. But I like to bring that sense of community back, and I love Whitestown. I love Boone County, and just the people are so great. And so I've been active for many years on the Facebook page. And then 91.1 reached out to me. I met with the station manager. We started kicking around some ideas and thought, why not take this to the next level and start a radio show, really bringing it to a bigger audience, which is a lot of fun. So I'm having a blast with it so far.
Yay! Well, I think it's so fun to see how, like many testimonies, social media has given you. Like, were you ever planning to start a radio show?
No, this was never part of the plan.
Is that on your 2024 bingo card?
Not at all. But social media gets a bad rap. I think there's so many great things that can happen with it too.
Yeah.
You can connect with people in ways that weren't possible 20 years ago. So just having that medium, it's used for a lot of bad things, but I like to see the positive and see all the good it can do as well.
Yeah, because it's amazing how you can become an admin on a Facebook group and then see that turn into the opportunities. So is there any advice that you would have for someone running a Facebook group? Would you do it again if you could?
Yes, I actually love it. I would say don't get caught up in the drama. People love to. No argument has ever been solved on Facebook, for sure.
Are you sure?
At least none I've ever seen. Don't get caught up in the drama. Stay neutral. Make it a positive, fun place, and people are going to be attracted to that.
So as an admin, how do you feel about the upcoming election season on Facebook?
I'm ready for all the memes and articles and oh my gosh, it's going to be interesting for sure. This whole election season, I'm just not excited about it at all for
Yeah.
several reasons, but yeah.
Is there another candidate who's not over 70 that we could consider? I mean, wisdom, I mean, there's benefits of age with wisdom.
Exactly.
And, you know, they've seen things. I wish my late grandfather was alive because I would love to hear his thoughts on Putin's interview.
Yeah.
Part of my family's from Slovakia, and actually, it's a sad story, but one of my older generations was shot by Russian communists, and their land was confiscated, and that was like World War I era, roughly, I think.
Okay.
And the children hid in the barn and escaped and came to America, and
Wow,
you know,
that's
like,
a great story in itself.
crazy. But you know, when he was talking about in that interview, just like the territorial disputes, I was like, I wish Grandpop was here because you could send him in his place, and you know. But so wisdom, like with age, is beneficial. But when you have dementia, I think it's time to be out of office. So.
You know, I would say again on the politics side, local politics are going to be the way.
Yes.
That's going to have the most direct impact on your life. So I would say,
yes,
go to town council meetings, go to school board meetings, go to zoning meetings, because that is where you're going to have the most input, and it's going to affect your direct life more than a presidential election will.
100%. That's, I mean, like the zoning, especially because I know there's many residents with Whitestown who get frustrated about all of this development that happens, and that's where it happens is zoning. Like when you go from ag to residential, like that has to get approved, and obviously it's the free market. So if a family gets a crazy amount of money for land, that's
of course
like
sell. Yeah.
Unless we collude and form a trust and you know, Whitestown residents take over all the farmland. I mean, it's just part of it. But is there anything coming up with your theater that people should consider attending?
So I'm actually directing a show later this year, which I think you're going to be a part of, which is very exciting.
Am I on stage?
Yeah.
What's happening?
You're going to showcase your art for us, and we'll put you on stage too. Okay. The one-woman show. Yeah.
It's a 2-second thing. I wave and I run.
So at the theater I mentioned, Center Stage Community Theater in Lebanon. It's just off of downtown Lebanon, behind Arnie's up there.
Okay.
I'm directing a show in September called The Outsider, which is a political comedy, so just in time for election season.
Yeah.
It basically makes fun of the whole elections process. It's about a governor that has to resign due to a scandal. The lieutenant governor comes in and basically doesn't want to do any of the job. He's very shy. So he has the staff of people around him trying to boost him up and make things happen. So I've read the script. It's very funny. I'm excited. It's my directorial debut.
Aww.
So we'll see how that goes.
That's awesome.
But it's a great theater. It's a small, intimate setting. It seats 50 people.
Okay.
And we sell out a lot of shows, so it's proven to be very popular over the years.
I'm really sad because I lived in Lebanon for like 5-6 years and I didn't know that was there, so I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. We call ourselves the best kept secret in Boone County. So, and you're going to be showcasing your art there, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. It's always nice when you get invited to things.
Absolutely, yes. You know, I think artists can collaborate together, and the more that we can do that, it just is beneficial for both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you need art for the show or want art inspired by the show, we can definitely have a conversation. I know I'm putting on the spot with that, but
you know, that actually is a great idea. I would love to incorporate one of your pieces into our set if we can.
I wasn't trying to think that way, like within position. You're welcome to do that, but which would be really cool. But sometimes when like you read a script or like say there's a poem or something, and if there's, I don't know, it's not uncommon for musicians to read a poem and then write a piece in response to
I
that.
see
So
what
that's
you're
kind
saying.
of what,
I like that. I like that idea too.
yeah,
I will see what I can find. That's a great idea.
yeah. Artistic collaboration is always so fun.
I
And
like
that's how,
that.
like, we got Monet and all of the Impressionists. Like, I wish instead of art history focusing on like the sexualization history of all of these artists and their partners, like, which does have some validity maybe in a particular painting, but like, let's talk about how they made the painting. Because like back then you had to make your own pigments, and like
Exactly.
did they have little interns who
They
made
had
all
to
of their
do it all. Yeah.
canvases? Like, I need to know these things because the level of paintings that they made, like the quantity
Yeah, it's
for how old they
amazing.
were.
Yeah.
I mean,
I had the opportunity to go to Paris last year, and we went to the Louvre, and so many just gorgeous Monet paintings in there, just incredible. Over 100 years ago,
mm-hmm.
how they were able to achieve that, and even further back, some of the, you know,
yeah,
medieval paintings, from 1,000 years ago, how they were able to make these colors, just incredible.
yeah, and a lot of times the pigment. I am not an expert in this, but like I highly considered studying art chemistry at one point because it's just so fascinating, like how colors come into production and get produced and all of that. But a lot of times the colors that you see in paintings are, depending on the origin, reflective of that area. So when you dig up umber, like raw umber, like that's from that area.
I didn't realize that.
So I have a dream of someday doing a piece that's entirely from Indiana, like the wood,
I
the
love that.
canvas,
Yeah.
the pigment. I have a walnut tree and a black walnut in my backyard, and you can make like, if you distill that, you can make a stain and an ink from it. And so I just think that would be really cool.
I love that idea. That's really cool.
It takes a lot of work though.
It's a long-term project.
Yeah. Well, I know that we both have appointments in a minute, so I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity and being on the show and just being able to talk about such an important cause. I don't know how many lives we saved, but I hope that it certainly gives people
If we
awareness.
helped one person, I'll take that as a win. So, again, thank you for joining us and being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt, and everybody tune in to 91.1 when you have a chance.
Thank you.